Assalamu alaikum, brothers, inshallah. I'd like to request everyone to move closer. Inshallah, brothers, move closer. Inshallah, we'll be starting the tafsir program, inshallah ta'ala. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen sayyidina wa nabiyyina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد النبي الامي وعلى اله واصحابه وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. Alhamdulillah, in our previous discussion we talked about the interaction between Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam. And this interaction that took place was of unique nature, and this interaction that took place between the two really shows us the omnipotence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow upon a human being such knowledge from his own wisdom and choice that even the closest people to him, which are the Prophets ﷺ, though they have been given immense knowledge, though they have been given a certain degree and a certain status in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the eyes of the people, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his infinite wisdom and mercy and through his infinite knowledge, and in a very loving way, could teach those very beloveds of his a very important lesson, because all of this essentially stemmed from Musa alayhi salatu wassalam's statement to his people that I am the most knowledgeable, when in fact knowledge, all of it goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, wrapping up the story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, we learn that Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, him actually speaking out against the actions of Khidr alayhi salam, was due to his prophetic nature, along with us learning the very important lesson that if there is a certain something which is wrong, which is something which is not correct that is taking place in front of us, it should be addressed and it should be called out, and it should be with a matter of hikmah, in such a manner which does not make the person in front of you feel uncomfortable. It doesn't make him feel as if he's being belittled or he's being, his status or whatever stature he has. It is not being hindered. Rather, it is in a very loving and in a way filled with hikmah. So when Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he spoke out against what Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam was doing, he did it in a manner which befit his nature, because ultimately he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But post their interaction, what happened, Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, in actuality, he explained as to why he did what he did. He answered the $1 million question as to why he performed those certain acts. The first act being ripping the plank out of the ship, number one. Number two, him killing that boy, right, who was playing amongst the other children. Number three, him not taking any type of compensation for fixing a wall that was supposed to fall down. Because of course, as we all know, when they went to the villagers, asked for some hospitality, they were rejected. And when there was a wall that was supposed to fall down, and break, Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam grabbed the wall, put it back in place, then he moved on. Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, upon seeing this, said that, listen, they didn't offer us any hospitality, and they actually rejected our request for hospitality. Why don't you charge for the work or for the remediation of this wall? But Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam said that this is it. You asked too many questions. I told you from the beginning, you are not إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. You will not be able to bear patience with me. I am doing these certain things because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told me to do them, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a certain amount of knowledge that you do not possess, right? That you do not have. You have a certain amount of knowledge which I do not possess or have either. But now we're going to discuss about the ta'wil, the interpretation as to why did Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam do what he did. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He actually explains to us why He did what He did. Why did Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam perform such actions? Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam says, سَأُنَبِّئُكَ بِتَأْوِيلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within the Quran al-Kareem says that Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam says, سأنبئك بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا. That now I will inform you of the nature of the actions that I performed. بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا, the interpretation of those, and I will tell you about those things upon which you could not bear patience. He says, أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. The whole idea or the whole notion behind tearing up that plank or tearing off that portion of the boat, there was a higher reasoning and there was a larger, there was a bigger scheme in play, that when that ship owner or those people of the ship would actually travel further down their route, there was an oppressive king who would take away and actually seize those ships which would enter into that particular area. So Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam tore this plank in the ship to make sure, and one of the principles of that oppressive king and that tyrant was he would only take ships which were fully intact. He would not take a ship which even had the slightest bit of defect. So Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, tearing that plank, saved the ship owners from losing their property, from losing their ship. فأردت أن أعيبها, I wished or I intended on making some defect within it. وكان وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا, because there was a king, an oppressive king or tyrant who was further down their route, further down their journey, who would actually take away their ship and seize their property. وأما الغلام فكان أبواه مؤمنين فخشينا أن يرهقهما طغيانا وكفرا. Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam says, as for the boy, why did Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam do what he did to that boy? He says that boy, his parents were فَكَانَ أَبُوَاهُ مُؤْمِنِينَ. His parents were true believers, right? His parents were true believers. فَخَشِينَا أَن يُرْهِقَهُمَا طُغْيَانًا وَكُفْرًا. So we were afraid, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, or Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we were afraid, we were scared that this child would be the main reason for the parents to leave the fold of Islam. Now, so many things, subhanAllah, how could this be a good thing, a child dying? But one thing we fail to realize is that, subhanAllah, a child passing away in that age means that child is from amongst the people of paradise. Not only will that child, if he were to grow older, be a means of destruction for his parents, but be a means of destruction for himself as well. So not only is he going to the hellfire, or would he be going to the hellfire, but also his parents, who were true believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would also be going to the hellfire. So the parents are saved in this scenario, as is the child. Then Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam furthermore mentions, he says, فَأَرَدْنَا أَن يُبْدِلَهُمَا رَبُّهُمَا خَيْرًا مِنْهُ زَكَاةً وَأَقْرَبَ رُحْمًا. That we wished and we wanted and intended that we make this situation for them changed in a means of good. Then finally, the final interpretation, وَأَمَّا الْجِدَارُ فَكَانَ لِغُلَامَيْنِ يَتِيمَيْنِ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, the final incident was, Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, he stopped the wall from dropping down onto the pavement or onto the ground. Why did you do that? He explains that this wall was actually over an area which contained, or was actually risen above an area which contained the wiratha, or the inheritance of two youngsters. And these two youngsters, their inheritance and and what they were heir to would have been lost, would have actually, if the wall had collapsed onto that area, would have broken the ground and would have exposed their inheritance or whatever was due to them. And their father was someone who was very pious. He was a man of piety. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and Khidr Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Khidr alayhi salam stopped the wall from falling to save the children's inheritance, to save what their property was, because as we know, and children, due to their lack of experience, people who are older than them, when they see money, what could happen? They could take advantage of them. They could, take their wealth and put it into their own businesses, right? The family members, when money is involved, everyone's all for everyone. It's a survival of the fittest, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended on saving these children's wealth and saving their inheritance from this wall collapsing upon it. And if the wall were to collapse upon it, what would happen? Allah subhanahu the people would seize their wealth and take it and use it for their own benefit. وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا, and under that they had certain treasure, they had certain wealth which was buried under that area that was buried. And this was a tradition of the people. Of course, nowadays we have banks. Nowadays we have safety deposit box. We have a locker. We have those storage lockers, right? A person can store his valuables above ground. But in that day and age, those things weren't present. So the way that people used to preserve their belongings and their valuables or their treasures, they would bury it underground, and they would keep that, and it would be only a known location only to them. So if this wall were to fall upon it, as I mentioned, it would have exposed their treasure, it would have exposed their wealth, and it would be a means for their wealth to be taken by the people. وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي. Khidr alayhi salatu wasalam, he says and clarifies it. I did not do any of these things through my own volition. I did not do any of these things through my own account. Rather, I did these things because of the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. And these very things that I've just mentioned to you are the exact things which you were unable to bear patience upon. That wraps up the story of Khidr alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam. We learned many lessons from it, of how Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam's interaction, their dialogue, their discussion, their journey together. The amount of lessons we learn are endless, right? We learn that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing a servant of His, and we discussed even the prophethood of Khidr alayhi salam, whether he was a prophet or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choosing His servant, using him as a means to even teach one of His own beloveds, which was Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. Next we move on to the story of Dhul Qarnayn. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ. Now the significance behind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ, this is an answer to actually in actuality the very first reason, or one of the reasons why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this surah. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He revealed this surah as a comfort to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was approached by the Quraysh, who had actually prior to approaching Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when the Jews asked them that, listen, how can we debunk Na'udhu Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and what he says, how can we, give us something that we can use against him? The Jews replied that, ask him these three questions. If he is able to answer them, then he is a true prophet of Allah. If he is not, then rajulun taqalluha, he is a person who is just speaking out of his back pocket, he's just speaking nonsense, he's not someone you have to really worry about. But when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was unable to answer them right away. Right? What happened? For 15 days and nights, the wahi did not come, and Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam eventually came with wahi, and he revealed the ayat. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا. Do not say anything, or do not say anything without attaching the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to it. So the only thing we'll really be discussing today is, why is Dhul Qarnayn named Dhul Qarnayn? Right? There's many interpretations, right? But really it boils down to this, that one principle which we've been discussing again and again and again. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He feels as if something is important, He would mention it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the knower of all things. He's the supreme being. He's a being who is in need of no one, but everyone is in need of Him. He's as-Samad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of no one, but everyone is in need of Him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He feels as if something is important, then He would mention it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning Dhul Qarnayn, by just mentioning his name, by just mentioning and answering the question of the person who traveled from the east to the west, just as the Jew said, ask him this question about the man, about the story of the man who traveled from the east to the west. Ask him regarding this person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He did not mention who Dhul Qarnayn was, right? He did not mention who Dhul Qarnayn was, what time period he was from, how vast his kingdom. He did not specifically mention any of these things. All He said, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we will say, the addressee being Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, say that I will mention to you, I will relate to you regarding him, meaning Dhul Qarnayn. إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآتِينَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. That we gave him power, or we gave him kingdom on earth. Right? We gave him kingdom on earth. And we provided for him for a way to everything. وَآتِينَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. We provided for him a means of everything. Meaning that Dhul Qarnayn was a person who was a ruler, a king, who had almost every means disposal available to him to perform whatever he needed to perform. But the scholars, they have some interpretations as to why his name was Dhul Qarnayn. Some scholars, they mention, inshallah, we'll wrap up with this final one or two points, that some scholars mention that the reason his name was Dhul Qarnayn is because he actually had 2 marks of horns on his, qarn in the Arabic language means horn. So Dhul Qarnayn, the one with 2 horns, he actually had 2 marks on his forehead, due to which actually looked like there were horns that caused people to actually call him Dhul Qarnayn. That's one interpretation. The second interpretation is that he had curly hair, right? He had curly hair that would actually span on the front of his forehead, right? Curly hair, it would be curly locks at the front of his forehead, due to which people will call him Dhul Qarnayn. Those locks on his forehead, which was his hair, looked like horns, so that's why people would call him Dhul Qarnayn. But once again, going back to the main point, as we've discussed again and again and again, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not specified it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not deem it necessary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not feel as if it is necessary to relate it. The main thing is that the answer, even the Arabs, look, subhanAllah, this teaches us another point to establish this principle. Even the people, the Arabs who came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asking about the man who traveled to the east and the west, they felt satisfied upon hearing that Dhul Qarnayn was this XYZ person. They didn't ask further that, listen, where was he from? What time period, what area was he from? Right? How many courtiers or how many subjects did he have in his kingdom? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention any of it. And even the Arabs, who were the greatest enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the time, they also felt satisfied upon hearing وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْقَرْنَيْنِ قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And then the whole story as it goes ahead, inshallah ta'ala, in our next session we'll be discussing the detailed story of what took place with Dhul Qarnayn. And actually the wrap up to it all was what Dhul Qarnayn did for the people who were in the muddy water area, right? The area where there was muddy water, right? And then there was a group of people, inshallah, I don't want to give too much information, I'll leave everyone with a little bit of a, as I like to say, cliffhanger, that what happened and how Dhul Qarnayn helped those people in that place. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to benefit from what was said. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to act on what was said. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.